Angel Weston Jolly. It's not easy to look at yourself honestly. Most people won't or don't until a major life crisis happens, and even then, many people resist. That's the ego and self-preservation mode, and that's when pride can get in the way instead of serving us. Pride can keep us in denial and seeing the truth about oneself. I was one of them for many years. My pride and ego, self-preservation, didn't allow me to see my part in the pain and suffering I created, as well as see the beauty of my soul. And the universe says you are either going to learn the hard way through pain and suffering, or you can learn the easy way through letting go, trusting, and surrendering to the higher power. But eventually, either way, you will learn. One of the first compliments I received from a man that didn't want anything in return was from Weston Jolly, another angel in my life. I was attending my first workshop with him, walked in, he looked at me and exclaimed, "Wow, you're drop-dead gorgeous." Not expecting that, I said nothing in return. My self-esteem was still damaged, and I was lost and insecure on the inside. I didn't feel pretty. I wasn't ready to receive it or believe it, although it felt good. Weston is a gifted, intuitive medium, and during the transformative workshop, he honed right in on me. The question he posed to everyone in the group: what is the repetitive pattern that shows up in your relationships and in your life? When it came my turn, I said, rejection. He shook his head. Something more. I said timidly, abandonment? Bingo, he replied. He turned away, then doubled back and looked at me with wide eyes. Wow, he said. On a scale of 1 to 10 for passion, you blow the 10 away. Your passion is off the charts. Weston was the first person to recognize that in me and see my true self. I had so much depth, intensity, and passion, as Weston called it, but never let it show. I didn't even know what it was. On the outside, I seemed to have it all together. On the inside, I was still a lost soul. Can you see me now? I longed for someone to see me, not the hurt, abandoned girl, but the powerful, beautiful goddess. Weston saw the real me, not the masked me. Just be beautiful you, was his advice to me in every session I attended with him. Even though I didn't know how to do that yet, it felt so good to be in his presence. That's the key to holding the space for someone's greatness to emerge, to be the one awake, who recognizes another's light even when they are asleep to it. Another short story from my dad's emails, The Rose Within. A certain man planted a rose and watered it faithfully, and before it blossomed, he examined it. He saw the bud that would soon blossom, but noticed thorns upon the stem, and he thought, How can any beautiful flower come from a plant burdened with so many sharp thorns? Saddened by this thought, he neglected to water the rose, and just before it was ready to bloom, it died. So it is with many people. Within every soul there is a rose. The godlike qualities planted in us at birth grow amid the thorns of our own faults. Many of us look at ourselves and see only the thorns, the defects. We despair, thinking that nothing good can possibly come from us. We neglect to water the good within us, and eventually it dies. We never realize our potential. Some people do not see the rose within themselves. Someone else must show it to them. One of the greatest gifts a person can possess is to be able to reach past the thorns of another and find the rose within them. This is one of the characteristics of love, to look at a person, know their true faults, and accepting that person into your life, all the while recognizing the nobility in their soul. Help others to realize they can overcome their faults. If we show them the rose within themselves, they will conquer their thorns. Only then will they blossom many times over. Author unknown. Ego, edging God out. Love is who you are. The ego is something you have. Quote by me, Soulfire. In the spiritual world, the ego usually gets a bad rap. With an acronym of edging God out, how could it not? But spirit doesn't live in the clouds. Spirit is right here in you and me and in everything. Without the ego, we would not be an effective force on the earth plane, and we wouldn't be able to function as a human being. It's important to understand, however, that while the ego is necessary for us to be here, it cannot run the show anymore. We need to keep in mind that we have an ego. We are not an ego. Once we have that understanding, everything shifts. I look at the ego as two parts, healthy ego and unhealthy ego. When everything becomes, it's all about me, we are in an unhealthy version of our ego. An example of this I learned from my favorite Buddhist monk, Gentagden. He was the first one to connect the dots between depression and unhealthy ego for me. He offered another perspective when he said depression is selfish because you're only thinking about yourself. Wow, how true is that statement? We get so caught up in our unhappy thoughts and sad story about ourselves that we identify with the feeling that comes after and say, I am sad or I am depressed, and that becomes our reality. The thought comes before the feeling, not the other way around. I do believe there could be a chemical imbalance as well, but regardless, we need to get control over the detrimental negative thoughts we obsess over. When our ego keeps us stuck in an old fear or limiting thought pattern, and we are afraid to change or step out of our comfort zone because we are afraid of what people might think about us, we are in an unhealthy part of our ego. My first lesson about Mr. Ego keeping me stuck happened about 10 years ago during my studies of the science of getting rich with Bob Proctor. He was coaching me one-on-one for a period of time and invited me to be on his global conference call with hundreds of people listening. It was an impromptu interview on how I healed my back and neck using some products by a Japanese wellness company, Nikken, along with yoga. I was nervous. My angel friend, Pat Barry, coached me down from the fear of speaking ledge. He said, "You are so nervous because you think this is all about you. It's not about you. This is about others, something bigger than you. You don't know who will be on that call and will be touched or affected by your story." As soon as he said that, something inside of me shifted and I relaxed. Ever since that Pat Barry speech, anytime I have to speak in front of a large group of people, I think about what he said. Even after teaching yoga for 16 years, I still get nervous. Another time I was in California at a huge marketing convention with about 1,000 people. Pat said he wanted to interview me and then have me go on stage and do a headstand. I said okay and sat down to wait, thinking, what did I just get myself into? While I was sitting, my knees and legs would not stop shaking. Great, how am I going to do a headstand like this? Okay, this is not about me, remember. I took a deep breath and asked for backup from on high and went up there. On stage now, calmly panicking as I set up for this headstand because it was a makeshift stage that moves. You gotta be kidding me. So now I'm shaking on a moving stage and have to do a headstand. This is perfect, I joke with myself. Oh, and I forgot to add, I was dressed in nice slacks and a button-down shirt, no yoga attire. Without thinking, I just did it. I went up smoothly, held it, heard a lot of applause, and then exited just as smoothly, sweating profusely. Phew, thank you, God. That was a comfort zone buster for sure. Once I remember this is not about me, I'm just the channel. My knees stop shaking. I relax and become a more effective messenger. Taking the spotlight off ourselves allows our true essence to shine and our authenticity felt. It's not about what you have that is your greatness. It's about what you can give. That came from a yogi tea bag. The healthy version of the ego is when it takes on the role of employee to the boss soul and acts and creates with the highest of intentions for the highest good of all. I like Patanjali's explanation of the ego from the Yoga Sutras. The self will always be falsely represented by the ego until our ignorance is removed. I often refer to these two I's as the little I and the capital I. What is the difference? Just a small dot, a little blemish of ego. The capital I is just one pure stroke, just as the highest truth is always pure and simple. What limits us and makes us little? Just the dot. Without the dot, we are always great, always the capital I. All the practice of yoga is just to remove that dot. I love that. On the other side of the unhealthy ego spectrum, I know many spiritual people with good intentions who ignore their own needs or feelings as they feel it's their ego and not very high or spiritual. We can't ignore ourselves and think we're going to be holier or more enlightened that way. Our needs and feelings matter as well. If something or someone is causing us discomfort, it's usually an issue that needs to be addressed, not ignored. The world does not need more martyrs, it needs more teachers. Spiritually naked. As you start to awaken and realize you need a little tweaking, it's still not easy to change. Change can be challenging and uncomfortable. Since we are creatures of habit and comfort, many of us choose not to make the effort and stay in our comfort zone. However, life begins when we step out of our comfort zone. We come out of our comfort zone and take risks every day without even knowing it. Inspirational speaker and author Tony Robbins first brought this to my attention. He said, "Of course we take risks. Every time we get in our car and drive, we are having faith that the double white line in the road is keeping us safe as we drive by cars at 60 miles per hour. Maybe we can take that same risk and faith and apply it into other areas of our lives as well." When I was new to the spiritual path, I thought I could change my subconscious, self-sabotaging thought patterning by doing things completely opposite. For example, I would walk in the outdoor at the supermarket and walk out the indoor. At the boardwalk on the beach, I would run counter to the direction that everyone else was running and walking. I don't know if that did anything for me on any level, but I do know I aggravated a lot of people. I was willing to try anything. I was committed. When Weston Jolly asked me if I could be more feminine at the end of one of our sessions, I walked out confused as to what he really meant. I started wearing more skirts and dresses, thinking that would make a difference. I had no idea what the concept of feminine really meant. It wasn't until later in my spiritual studies that I realized what he meant, and I had one of those aha moments. That is how spiritual knowledge works. We hear a concept 1 or 2 or 20 times by different people in different ways, then one day it clicks and makes sense. Enlightenment happens. Spiritual seeds and practice, like exercise, is cumulative. Nothing goes to waste, no matter how many times you stop and quit, then restart again. Like the ragu spaghetti sauce, it's in there. The timing of when that happens is different for every single person. We cannot force awakening to happen. We just need to remain open and receptive, which is what the feminine energy is about. In another session with Weston, our topic was on being spiritually naked. So when I was approached to do a couple of different naked photo shoots, I said, sure, why not? I figured naked photo shoots would hasten my healing and enlightenment. Still type A personality, trying to reach nirvana and inner peace as fast as I could. I don't think it did anything but help me get over being naked in front of people I didn't know. In my head the entire time, I kept chanting, I am not my body, I am not my body, as I pranced around naked like a fairy. It was one of those things, looking back, when you cringe and say, oh, I can't believe I did that. It seems I have a lot of those moments.